Part 3. Appendix. Money, Inheritance and the Family by Elizabeth MacEachern Miller. What I would like to do is put our inflation and monetary problems in an historical framework. Although many of us have just awakened to the magnitude of the global crisis we face, I would like to try to show that it has not been either accidental or a series of foolish blunders by our leaders in Washington, D.C., which has led us to this place. It has actually been a gradual transition or change of ideas about property and wealth, which has been developing in our country for a long time, and we are just now beginning to bear its terrible consequences. What originally seemed to be the rantings of second-rate professors and intellectual ne'er-do-wells has come to pass and borne ill fruits in our generation. We have come to a crossroads in our history. The choice will be an individual one, but will have collective results. The catalyst that is forcing us to choose a direction is the same that is enrolling us into conferences of this nature. Our property system is under attack. Basically, modern man has existed under one of two property systems, either state ownership and control or private ownership. In our day, we have several representative systems of state ownership. Communism, as practiced in the USSR, is the most advanced. However, total centralized power is suicidal, and starvation would bring down the system, so certain sneaky concessions are made to the farmers. They are allowed to raise produce on small plots to be sold privately in local markets. This little tolerated freedom, plus many unpublicized deals with our government, keeps the system operating and the Russian people alive. Swedish socialism, although in appearance more benevolent, is as deadly to the soul as communism to the body, and the nation is committing suicide with alcohol. We are seeing the British nation barely fend off complete collapse, as the ideas of Fabian socialism have strangled that once vibrant people. Benito Mussolini should be given credit for the particular brand of statism that has found such a fertile environment in our own country. His system was not one of direct takeover through revolution, but gradual ownership through regulations and control. The velvet noose is slowly choking off our productive capacity, restricting our freedom of movement, and swamping us in a sea of paperwork. Under our increasingly controlled economy, the state becomes a giant umbrella under which each sphere of our lives is regulated. Our property can only be used in certain ways. Our educational systems must be in tune with the HEW official dogma. Our business and professional lives are always adjusting to more encroachments on our freedom to exercise our own judgment. Under a statist property system, nothing is allowed to exist outside of or independent of the big umbrella of central planning. When everything in our country is planned and run like our postal system, we will have arrived by degrees into this cradle-to-grave security system whereby we are relieved of the responsibility of making any decisions, but also of the privilege of eating, or at least eating well. To finance the quote-unquote big umbrella that covers our lives requires a tax. And the most efficient arm of this property control system is always the collecting arm. The spending side of government is loose, corrupt, and inefficient, but the extracting side always works well because it is the lifeblood of the system. This is the direction into which we are moving. Pick any area: medical, dental, church, real estate, travel. Personal privacy and the sphere of operating freedom is a lessening like a closing vice. We find ourselves at this juncture. My argument is that basically we have arrived at this point because we wanted to be here. We asked for this and we got it. I am not saying we like it, but I am saying that we voted for it and are still voting for it. We are not a captive nation, and this system has not been imposed upon us by foreigners. It is of our own making, and although certain aspects of the big umbrella system have become uncomfortable, I am not sure that the discomfort has been enough to impel us to get this status monkey off our back. There is another property system which I will call the total free enterprise view. This theoretical position is held by libertarians and some conservatives. The writings of Ayn Rand have done much to propagate this viewpoint. It asserts that ownership of wealth and property is exclusively personal. Man is limited in his acquisitions and dispersal of his property solely by the marketplace. In this, quote, survival of the fittest, end quote, system of ownership, pornographic endeavours, drug dealings and other such activities become legitimate. If it sells, it's valid. This anarchical view of wealth appeals to our greed and is dangerous because it wars against the existing governmental system but offers no replacement. As an example, these freedom-loving anarchists were widespread in Russia before the revolution of 1917. It was their unrealistic, utopian proposals that helped topple the existing monarchy of Nicholas II. But it was the organised cadre of Bolsheviks who took control and put to death their freedom-loving brothers. It was this anarchistic element of freedom and love that viewed the state as slowly withering away. In this century, there is no state that is withering. Government systems do not wither. They are usurped, usually by foreign states, or their power is usurped from within by local seats of power, of which the family could very definitely be one. To conclude this discussion of the private and personal view of wealth as put forth by certain free enterprise elements, it is necessary that I show a psychological side effect that this position creates. Personal ownership of wealth is a responsibility, and when property is held exclusively by an individual with only the marketplace as a source of direction, then this responsibility can become a great burden to modern man. It is under this view of property that guilt imposes its unbearable weight, and ownership or heirship becomes a curse. To get out from underneath this burden of guilt, man looks for and finds all kinds of legitimate and illegitimate ways to remove the responsibility of ownership and its attendant guilt from off his shoulders. My time permits only 2 examples. One is gambling. Whenever you see gambling become a popular pastime, you can be assured that it is the means used to remove wealth and its responsibility from the shoulders of the possessors. Studies show that men and women gamble to lose and return to their homes and businesses refreshed and renewed. My other example is more to the point of this conference. Statism, as a governmental system, acts in much the same way as a gambling casino. It is the vehicle used to remove the responsibility of wealth from the shoulders of those not prepared to bear it. Remember, as I said before, we are still voting for this system. Our citizens do not want wealth or property about which they must make decisions. They want to play, like children in public parks or sport palaces. Our foreign policy also shows that we cannot bear the burden of world leadership and power, and we are committing national suicide by throwing our inherited wealth at every country in the world. It is now estimated that we are paying Panama upwards of $4 billion to take the canal off our hands. To recapitulate, first, statism as a property system is destructive to freedom, to capital and wealth. Society decays materially and spiritually whenever or wherever it is adopted. Second, anarchy or total free enterprise is only a theory, although practiced to some degree within a property system which allows moral and entrepreneurial freedom. This system breeds envy, guilt, and class consciousness. It is a dangerous position because many people today believe that this is what we fought the American Revolution over. This is not true. The third view of property has a long history and is familiar to all of us. This view is the biblical system which owns and holds property within the family unit. This is the view of property set forth by our American forefathers and our government charter. The Constitution embodies this view. Basically, it is this position which is under attack today. This family system of ownership needs to be thoroughly re-examined and rethought among economists, educators, and businessmen in order to re-establish a system which will have the strength and unity to withstand the quote-unquote inevitable rising tide of socialism. Here in the United States, we have had this biblical property system in operation to a greater degree than is generally known or admitted today. Our law structure, which supports this property system, is founded on the Decalogue or Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not steal does not permit our government to rob us of our income through taxes or inflation. Also, it does not allow the central government to assume itself to be the ultimate owner of our land, allowing us to rent it for an ever-growing fee called property taxes. Quote, the earth is the Lord's, end quote, and the ultimate owner is God, the Creator, who created it for man to use in certain ways. Quote-unquote government is also ordained of God, but not as the owner of all property. It has another function. Today, many people are concerned about the, quote, breakdown of law and order, end quote, and it is important to be perfectly clear about what is taking place. This country is not having a breakdown of law in the sense that there is less law now. As we all know, we have an increase of laws. What we are witnessing is the gradual transition from our biblically based law and property system to an arbitrary status law system. This new law system is based on the desires of the social central planners in Washington, D.C. The edicts of HEW, of the Treasury Departments, the State Departments or IRS will replace our old system, and ownership and wealth will be denied or allowed by the current elite in control. Not only did we have formerly a biblical or family ownership system of wealth, but it was supported by its own law structure. This property view takes its authority from Scripture, where the earth and all its resources are made for man's use by his Creator, and he holds all his wealth and possessions in trust. He is required to add to it capitalization, tax himself out of the increase, and distribute his estate to the next generation through the family. There are many ramifications of this property system which I do not have the time to explore with you, but I would like to mention one area in particular, the tax structure. Under the biblical system, which was re-established in part by the Puritans in this country, there were essentially two taxes. The first was a, quote, head tax, end quote, which was uniform for all citizens. Therefore, it had to be small enough for the poorest to pay. Because the central government was considered to be only a ministry of justice, its function was limited to the punishment of evildoers. Therefore, this small head tax supported the court system, plus the needed military expenses. The other required tax, the tithe, was limited to 10%, and it was to be paid out of one's increase or income. All the major social functions of the culture are to be maintained by this tax. It is important to note this point. The head tax is the support of the civil order, and the tithe the support of the social order and its use as directed by the tither or producer. Education, welfare, the church, and more are the recipients of this tax. This producer-directed giving principle of government impressed Alexis de Tocqueville when he visited this country in 1831. The status European system stood in stark contrast to the almost invisible government of the United States, with all its widespread principle of private giving, taking care of all the social ills of the communities. As you can readily see, this tax system alone would make for a strong people and a weak bureaucracy. Historically speaking, this country began with a property system which was biblical. Because of this foundation and its law structure, wealth increased almost miraculously, or so it seemed to visitors from the old world. But with our own forgetfulness of God's divine authority, we slipped into a personal free enterprise system governed more by man's greed. Some have called it the robber baron era in American history. Most of our great fortunes were amassed during this time. Cut off from divine authority and direction, a sense of guilt developed with the possessors of wealth and their heirs, while envy set in among the supported have-nots, and we began to desire the stagnant security of socialism and equality. Will Western civilization continue to disintegrate and decay? This national nostalgia binge and rush to buy anything old shows us we are looking backward to a time which we perceive to be better. Still more to the point, the production of today does not have the quality of yesterday. True, there is opportunity to make money, even to acquire modest incomes, but remember this: it is not particularly wonderful to be a rich man in a disintegrating society. For one thing, one must pay protection money in order to enjoy the little that is left over. Even more, our homes and the lives of loved ones are not safe. There is more to living than laying up treasure. We must also re-establish our Christian law system and reaffirm our faith. This must come first. Then we will be able to earn and enjoy our future and rest in the knowledge that our heirs will also be able to carry on. To stop the present crumbling, we begin not in Washington, D.C., but in the areas where we still have authority. As parents, we still rule our homes. Reclaim as much responsibility as you can in your communities and businesses. Become leaders. Home education, if only in the field of economics, will determine future events. Our young learn in the home what it is like to live in a debt-free family or in a family environment burdened by debt. We can become wasteful or frugal according to the habits of our parents. If this present generation is content with debt living, their offspring will be even greater borrowers than their parents. Debt living is always a progressive spiral downwards towards bankruptcy. Family money managed with proficiency and profit will bear fruit in the next generation. Teach economics in the home. This is the old hand that rocks the cradle theory, but that hand does not of necessity have to be, nor should it be, an exclusively feminine hand. You men should do more cradle rocking. Next, you should insist that our schools and colleges teach and reinforce the sound money management of the family. Begin at home, and from this family foundation, reach out to reclaim the decision-making power and authority from the state. The rewards will be tremendous, both present and future, for our families and our nation. This has been a Chalcedon Foundation production, produced by Grace Community School and Nicene Covenant Church. Published by Ross House Books. Copyright 1982 as The Roots of Inflation. Retitled and reprinted in 2002. Mark R. Rushdoony. If you've enjoyed this audiobook, be sure to visit chalcedon.edu for more books and audiobooks by R.J. Rushdoony.